It's timely, it's insightful, it's motivating, it's empowering. It's Time with Fred, your inspirational broadcast with host Fred Gaddy.
Hello, and thanks for tuning in to this episode of the Time with Fred podcast. This is a podcast that challenges mindsets and paradigms that hold us back. Some of these paradigms and mindsets are labels, and whether these are labels we place on ourselves or labels placed on us by others, these are things that impact our lives. And joining me today on this episode of the Time with Fred podcast to discuss this all-important topic is Maxwell. Anne is a psychotherapist who's worked for over 25 years with children who struggle with not fitting in, with being different, with being labeled with disorders. She's developed a unique approach for these children, the parents and family members, that allows them to shift from dismay, distress, and worry to being able to change all of that and to create a different way of being that works better for them. Anne grew up in a bilingual home where different was neither right nor wrong. It was just different. Prior to working with children and families directly, she worked in Washington, D.C. in national politics. She successfully lobbied for the authorization of and funding for a $25 million primary prevention and early intervention program for at-risk mothers and their babies. Eager to work with children and families, she's changed direction from lobbying on behalf of kids and families to attending graduate school so that she could become credentialed to work directly with them in a clinical capacity. Following her graduation, she worked in a variety of settings, including a residential treatment center, inpatient psychiatric hospitals, and outpatient clinics and practices, and incorporates the best of many trainings and workshops she's taking into her practice. A seeker at heart, she's constantly looking for what else she can add that might benefit kids of all ages and the adults in her lives. In addition to her clinical practice, Anne now travels around the world, teaching classes and speaking to groups of patients, teachers, and psychotherapists who work with and or behalf of children. Anne, thank you so much for coming on the Time with Fred podcast tonight.
You're so welcome, and thank you so much for inviting me. And that she travels around the world is the last trip around the world that she had was from Dublin to the U.S. I think it was March 5th, and that's it. I haven't been traveling since.
And then everything else changed.
And then
right?
everything else changes in the flash of an eye, yeah.
And I was doing a little bit of research earlier, and there was this article published by the United States National Library of Medicine and also the National Institutes of Health. And it says that healthcare professionals use diagnostic labels for both treatment and research purposes. But despite their clear benefits, diagnostic labels also serve as cues that activate stigma and stereotypes, and can have a significant and negative impact on interpersonal relationships. This also may affect individuals' willingness to seek and receive care. Your reactions to that?
I agree completely, and I would carry it one step farther. I think that one of the main stigmas or one of the things that occurs when kids are labeled, especially as kids, is that they're made to feel wrong for who they are. And then they're also made, it's almost like people who label them like that are asking them to become somebody that they're not, right? There's just a lack of, there's an unwillingness to allow them to actually be who they are. And so when I work with families, I encourage them to get their kids labels if the labels are going to create additional resources for them in the schools, and give them whatever's required in order to be able to seek therapy and treatment and stuff like that with people like me and that, but not to buy the labels as real. It's almost like to use them to whatever advantage they can get from that without buying it.
Yeah. So in other words, there are some good sides, right? There are some benefits to the labels, and there are some obviously negative sides, right?
There are hugely negative sides, and it's really, I think it's really important when kids are labeled to let them know this is, you're different and you're not the same as all the other kids, and there's nothing wrong with you. Different is different, and you're not like them. You've never been like them, and you're never going to be like them. And we're going to get you some services. We're going to do whatever. And then you just complete the sentence, but you let them know that there's nothing wrong with them.
Yeah.
Like the difference is not wrong. It's like what Temple Grandin says, different, not wrong, different, not less, whatever. I can't remember what the exact quote is, but like that. And that's how I was raised. My mom was a big believer in that. Different is different. I was raised in a bilingual home, and I traveled a lot as a little girl.
Yeah.
And
and I think it's important for us to, at least for me, to make the point, make it clear that we're not trying to minimize, any disability. We're not. We understand that these are real challenges that people go through, and we're not in any way trying to downplay. At least for me, that's why we have the expert here on the podcast. But this is really not to discount what the real challenges that people are going through, but really to talk about the negative impacts that some of these labels have on us. So I just thought I'll put that disclaimer out there. But Anne, in your role as a psychotherapist or as a child and family therapist, what are some of the negative impacts that you've seen of labels on the lives of the kids or families that you've worked with?
Well, a lot of them, all the way through, they view themselves as being wrong. But oftentimes the apples don't fall all that far from the tree usually. And a lot of times their parents have a lot of the same tendencies and were embarrassed by it and judged themselves and came to believe that there was something wrong with them, and then freaked out when they saw similar patterns and similar behaviors and similar, ways of thinking in their kids. And I think a lot of times parents, for all the right reasons, try to not have their kids have to go through what they went through, try really hard to get their kids to be different enough so that they can fit in. And one of the things that I do with the parents and kids that I work with is that I let the kids know and the parents know that there's a difference between knowing who you need to appear to be versus actually becoming that. Right. And so just a story, this little guy, he's just one of the sparkly ones. I love these kids because they're so different. But anyway, I would see him at his mom. He would say to his mom that he needed to see me, and they would come in for a session or two or something like that. And then they'd be good to go for 6 months or a year, whatever. Anyway, after a period of not seeing them, he came in, he was in the 8th grade. So second year of middle school, and he was failing math. And he's brilliant at math and all the way through elementary school. And I think in the 7th grade too, he's functioning at several levels above. And he was failing math. And he was also quarterback for a championship grade football team, like a league team. And they were regional champs. And the rule in the league is that you have to be passing all classes. Otherwise you can't play. So they came in and they were both really upset. And I said to him, what's going on? And his mom piped up and said, he's failing math. And I started laughing like I am right now. And I just looked at him and said, what's going on? I thought you were brilliant at math. And he goes, my teacher hates me. And so I had this conversation with him. I said, so does your teacher get how you learn? And he said, no. And I said, do you learn differently from the way she's teaching you? And he said, yes. And I said, does she think the way you think? And he said, no. And he started to settle down as I asked him the questions. And I said, does she expect you to learn the way she's teaching you? And then does she get upset with you when you don't? And he goes, yeah. And I said, and so then I asked him some other questions. Then I said, so can you learn anyway, regardless of the way she's teaching you? Can you pull it out of the books and, do your thing so that you just know? Because he's one of those magical kids that it gets the answer without having to do the work like that. And he said, yeah. And I said, so if you can do that, what if you can, and all the thing about, do you want to play football, blah, 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 like all that stuff got established. And then I said, so one of the things I want you to hear really clearly from me right now is that I'm not asking you to become somebody that you're not. And do not ever do that to yourself. Do not become somebody that you're not in order to please somebody who may even be unpleasable. But don't ever do that. My question to you is, can you give her enough of what she's asking from you in order to give you a passing grade without becoming it? Right? Without punishing her for being so different, without punishing yourself by getting into fights with her about this. Can you do that? And he said, I don't know, can I? And I said, I don't know. Like, give it a go and let me know. And his mom called me back a couple of weeks later and said, oh my God, he's passing again. And I said, how's he doing with the teacher? And she said, he doesn't like her any more than he used to, but he's quit fighting her. And it's almost like there's a truce right now. He's doing what you suggested. He's giving her enough so that she's backed off him needing to, follow this sort of cookie cutter approach. But that's my point of view. That's my perspective with these kids is.
So oftentimes it sounds like there has to be an understanding, right, of who, a very good understanding for that matter, of who the child is, right, or whoever we're dealing with, to be able to work well with them, right? Because we all have our expectations of what we want our kids to be or how we want them to behave. But oftentimes I think the downstream impact of that is what we run into, because we want to push them right into certain boxes, right, that they're not designed to fit in.
When I have parents in the room who say that kind of thing, I say to them, what's it like for you when somebody tries to make you be somebody that you're not and then punishes you for not being that person, right? What's it like for you when somebody doesn't actually get you, or somebody thinks there's something wrong with you because your thought patterns are different from theirs, or you show emotions differently from theirs, or whatever. And they're sort of like, whoa. And it's like, yeah, that's what it's like for the kids. So, and one of the underlying premises of my practice is to empower. And I hate that word, but I haven't been able to come up with another one because it's used so much and so overused, but really to empower kids to know who they are and to be confident in that, because then they don't become victims of anybody, mean teachers or teachers who just don't get them, or, they're not bullied. They don't become victims like that, really to empower them.
Yeah.
So does that make sense?
Yeah, it does. And going back to, I guess the expected societal norms, right? Whether it's traditional, whether it's teachers, that's the expectation of how this is what normal kids do, right? So to speak, right? And so if there is any deviation, I guess, from that, then okay, what's going wrong there, right? But that's not the case. That's really what gets us into trouble. I mean, what like get kids into trouble, right?
Well, it's the refusal to accept kids for who they are and having expectations. Like anytime, I don't know about you, but anytime I have anytime somebody has an expectation of me, my back gets up. It's like, you don't get to do that to me. Like, you keep your judgments to yourself, right? And like with kids, to teach them how to function with people who judge them, who have expectations of them, who project their own stuff onto them and then fault them for not being or meeting whatever those projections or expectations are, right? So that they don't become victims of not being able to meet somebody else's views. Like, to recognize that there are powerful people out there who have a lot of projections, a lot of expectations of you, and teach them tools that they can use so that they can function in that world without falling apart or becoming victims or, being bullied or whatever.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And there's a story that and this is a true story. I'm sure you're probably familiar with the story of Jillian Lynn, who ended up choreographing the Cats, Phantom of the Opera. But her story, when she was a little kid growing up in England, I think it was one day that her teacher sent her home with a note to her mom, and she brought the note, and the note to her mom suggestion that she takes her daughter Jillian to go see a doctor, and Jillian was not, I guess, normal, was failing every class, and she wasn't keeping up with the studies, and so she took her to the doctor. And as they were talking, she kept talking about all the bad things, right, or how she wasn't meeting up the school's expectations. And so the doctor asked Jillian if all the stories were true, and she asked Jillian to excuse him and mom. And so he turned on the music, and then he and the mother stepped outside. And the moment the music started playing, Jillian got up and started dancing on the tables, and they just stood outside the doctor's office watching Jillian.
Yeah.
For a good maybe 15 minutes or so, and they came back, and the doctor told Jillian's mom, there is nothing wrong with your daughter. Your daughter is a dancer. Take her to dance school. And so Jillian enrolled in the Royal School of Ballet, ended up becoming a great choreographer, ended up becoming a multi-millionaire. And
what a great doctor.
This is a story that I remind every time I think about this, it just does something to me. And how many kids, right, have been left or have been misdiagnosed because someone didn't see the potential.
The magic, the beauty, the capacities, right. I wrote a book with a couple of colleagues / friends called Would You Teach a Fish to Climb a Tree? A different take on
I was going to ask you that. Yeah.
ADD, ADHD, OCD, and autism. And it comes from the Albert Einstein quote of everybody is a genius, but if you judge a fish by its ability to climb a tree, it will live its whole life believing that it is stupid.
Yep.
Right? And meet these kids. Like Jillian was one of them until she met this magical doctor.
Yep.
Like, I just wish hundreds of thousands of doctors like that on the planet.
Yeah.
Right? And on parents like her mom who heard it, who got it, who had the sense of, to take her to somebody and actually found that doctor. I mean, yay, mom, like good on her, right? Because I think there's so many parents who don't trust what they know about their kids and defer to the experts.
Yes.
And when they meet somebody like that doctor, I can just sense the relief in the mom and the daughter. It's like, all right, we got a plan. We can do this. This works, right?
Yeah. But so how do we shift, or how do we shift from this paradigm, right? There's a research done by the University of Bath in the UK. It's actually a charity called Mind that says 3 to 5 people in every 100 are estimated to be diagnosed with personality disorders in the UK, with 1 to 3 in every 100 living with schizophrenia. However, the use of such labels, the researchers argue, can create such a self-fulfilling prophecy which could exacerbate the patient's conditions and lead to less well-targeted treatment. So again, it ties back into, the numbers are staggering. How do we begin to shift from this mindset and that is so pervasive in society today, that you're working hard for?
I get that it really starts with each one of us, and I was never I never functioned the way I was trained to function. And my supervisors used to pull their hair out with me. And part of the reason was because I was so not like so many of the other therapists in my trainings, and because of the fact that the kids loved me and got, we had magical results together, the kids and I did. When I was working at the residential treatment center, and then also on the inpatient psych units, and then in my outpatient practice. And it's one of my favorite things to give to parents. There are two. One is to ask them, what if you're the expert on your child? What if you know your child better than anybody else in the world, right? Better than the experts do, like that. And then the second one is the power of asking a question. And a question isn't a statement with a question mark at the end of it. A question is a question. So what do you want for dinner? Is that a statement with a question mark at the end of it, or is that actually a question? It's actually a statement with a question mark at the end of it, because it presupposes A, that they're going to eat, A, that they're hungry, B, that they're going to eat, and C, that it's going to be in the form of dinner. Are you hungry is a question. When are you going to get your homework done is one of those things that will explode most kids on the planet. Guaranteed, right? Do you have homework is a question. And then the thing that I remind parents of is, whose homework is it, yours or theirs? You know, but that's another story. But a lot of it is just, I don't know, being space and allowing. And one of my favorite questions for parents is, what is your job as a parent? And they come up with to guide, to love, to teach, to do this, to do that, you know, like protect, like all that kind of stuff. And my response is, what if your job as a parent is to teach your kids to choose? Because every choice that your child makes creates a future for them, right? And by osmosis, the parents get it for them too. But I say things like, here's your child, here's something that they're struggling with. If you intervene in the middle, you become their problem, number one. And so they lose you as a resource that they could go to and ask for help. And number two is they never get to like work through whatever it is this thing is that's keeping them stuck, that's keeping them blocked, like that. And so how do you teach your kids to choose? Sometimes you just have to keep your mouth shut, you know, and you give them information and then you let them choose. So, and you can do this really young. One of my friends, one of my friends, I mean, everybody in my world knows that I'm a therapist and that I work with kids and like that. And this was, I don't know, 8 years ago. I think he's 9 now. Came to me and it was, is it okay for me to tell stories?
Yes, absolutely.
Okay, cool. So she called me up one day and she said her baby was 1.5 years. And she said, I said, how's it going? And she said, oh my God, I don't think I'm going to live through the summer, let alone the next 18 years. Like, I cannot do this. And I said, what happened? And she said, she has a big extended family and they were having a cookout. It was May and he was, I think he was really actually 18 months old then. And she said, he spent the entire time running towards the grill, acting like he was going to touch it. And I spent the entire time screaming at him. And she said, I can't do that. That wasn't fun. I was in tears. Finally, he got in tears because I was so mad at him. And I said, all right, so here's the deal. What if you teach him, what if you give him information and then let him choose? And she said, what are you talking about? And I said, so when I present this to you, you're going to have to be willing to take him to the ER if he calls you bluff. But I said, here's what you do. The next time you have a cookout, make sure the grill is really hot and take his hand and put it really close to the grill and say, hot, hot, hurt. And if you touch this, big owie. And I said, and make it as big and dramatic as you can. Push all his doctor buttons and all his body pain buttons and let him know that it's going to be way worse than any of that. Like the doctor's going to have to do horrible things to him and blah, blah, blah. And I said, and I mean, given who your kid is just awesome, I said, he may call your bluff or whatever. And she said, okay. So after that, after the next cookout, she called me up and I said, how'd it go? And she said, oh my God, it's the hardest thing I've ever done. I did what we talked about and I turned away and he goes, Mom. And I turned around and he was running, he was acting like he was going to run to the grill. And she said, this was what was so hard. I locked eyes with him and I looked at him and I went like this. I just shrugged my shoulders and put my hands up in the air. And then she said, and I turned around and walked away. And she said, that's the last time he did it.
Wow.
Choice creates. And when you protect your kids from the futures that their choices are creating for them, they lose that. He got it at 1.5 years.
That's a very powerful story. And as you share this, I for a lot of parents, at least I'll speak for myself, we try to raise our kids, right, based on our own, expertise and our own social experiences, right? But it's very different. You got to be able to meet the child, right? No two kids are the same, I'd imagine. And so what worked for us growing up, or what worked for me as a child growing up, may not necessarily work for my child in this case. And I can imagine that level of control, right? Not wanting to relinquish that control. They'll go spank, they'll stop, right? But you have to almost give it up totally, right? Based on what you're sharing, right? For the child to learn right on their own, right?
You do, and with rare exceptions. Like, here's another story. A friend of mine was with a family, and the mom and the dad used to control the kid with anger. That was the only thing that worked. The kid would push, and then they just explode, and the kid would finally listen. And so they were in front of the house. The house was on a hill, and the house was on a busy street where there's a lot of traffic, and the kid was playing with a ball, and the ball started rolling down the hill, and the kid just took off after it. And so in those moments, you do step in.
Mm-hmm.
So my friend yelled, and he said he threw the intensity of his parents' anger at him when he said, "Stop." He said the kid's name and said, "Stop." And it was one of those yells where the entire neighborhood just froze. You know what I mean? Like,
Yep.
It was that
Yep.
intense.
Yep.
And everything stopped, and the ball rolled into the traffic. The cars stopped, right? They didn't run over the ball. Like that. You keep your kids from running into traffic. You do. You keep your kids from falling down a well.
Yep.
You do
Yep.
that kind of stuff.
Where there's a clear and present danger, right? You don't want to.
Yeah, but those are the exceptions.
Yeah. It almost sounds like a situational parenting, right? I mean, it all depends, right? No, one size doesn't fit all when it comes to parenting. You've gotta. It almost sounds like we have to go through training ourselves as parents, right, to be able to train our kids.
And Fred, what's so funny is that a lot of times kids will act out and come in, and they're what's known as the IP, the identified patient, and it turns out that it's the parents who've got stuff going on. So I spend a lot of time with parents, and then when the parents will settle down, and then when things start spinning out, because there's a lot of stuff that goes on, divorces, separations, job losses, moves, judgmental you name it. It just goes on and on and on. And sometimes it's hard. And one of the things that occurs is that kids will, quote, act out when they see their parents struggling, just because they don't know what else to do, and so that's what occurs often.
Yeah.
And we raise our kids. We end up raising our kids typically the way we were raised, unless there's somebody like that doctor, somebody like me, there are some people out there, unless somebody gives you permission or the awareness that you don't have to do that. Right. And one of my colleagues, Dr. Dain Heer, is a dear friend and a colleague. And one of the questions that he asks is, what if you could raise your kids the way you should have been raised, not the way you were? And it just, when I don't know about you, but there are times where I just swear, I will never say these words. And then they just come flying out of my mouth. Right. And it's like, and then not to make yourselves wrong. I mean, you do the best you can with what's going on in the moment. And sometimes, you don't make smart moves, smart choices, and it's not the end of the world. You just keep going, keep moving. You know,
and
kids are resilient, they're forgiving.
And how important are the words that we speak over our children? I mean, you like you rightly said, you know, perhaps a parent, a single mom or a single dad, or that there's a lot of stress, right? Even considering what's going around the world, you know, there's a lot of, you know, people dying out of this COVID thing, people losing. There's a lot of emotions, right, that are at play when it comes to. So let's take a single mom, for instance, who perhaps, you know, might have lost their, or maybe a parent, you know, mom, dad, you know, lost their jobs and, you know, no income, and they're upset, they're worried about the future, and those very, very vulnerable, right? And the kids are, you know, kids are going to be kids, right? They push their emotional, you know, buttons, and, you know, we fly out the handle, and we make these utterances, you know, negative utterances out of the anger and out of the hurt. And how important are those utterances and on our kids, right? I mean, how important are those? Or should we be intentional? Should we even think about the impact of the words or the things that we speak over these kids, even in those emotionally charged situations?
Yeah, there's no excuse. I don't care whether you lost your job or whatever. There's no excuse for what comes out of your mouth. Choice creates. You know, if I say this, what's that going to create? If I don't say it, what's that going to create? Like, what is this something that I even need to say? Is this even mine? One of the things that I really know about kids is when parents are okay, kids are okay. And it's not like it's a parent's fault if there's something going on with their child, but during these sort of highly turbulent emotional times, kids tend to do much better if their parents' anxiety level and emotional well-being is, you know, relatively calm. I mean, it's really okay to say, these are hard times, and, you know, daddy lost his job, and we're fine. We're going to be fine. Like whether he has a job or not, we're going to be fine. And you know, it like that.
So it sounds like we, as parents, we have to manage our own emotions, right? Before, even in the midst of all of that, we can't exert or release our frustrations on the kids and blame them for what they're doing. It sounds like we have to do a much better job managing our own emotions, whether it's anger or bitterness or whatever, right? As we parent kids, right?
And and to do that without making yourself wrong. Like, you know what I mean? It's like there's hard stuff going on, and sometimes you say stuff that you wish that you hadn't said, and then there's a question of whether you clean it up or whether cleaning it up is simply moving on and just letting it go. I was talking to a friend the other day, and she said that when I can't remember, they lived in Germany when she was a little girl, and she may even have been born in Germany, and they moved back to the US, and she didn't speak the language, and it was really tough, and she put on a lot of weight. And her mother looked at her one day and said, "You're disgusting. You disgust me." And that's, you know, it took her years to let that one go. But and without making the mom wrong, without faulting the mom, it's like, sticks and stones can break my bones.
Yeah, exactly. I was just thinking about that.
Like, they actually do hurt. And one of the things that occurs with kids is that they then begin to believe whatever those words are saying about them. They begin to take that in as if they were true. And, you know, those are sort of the demons that can run your life.
And what are some of the practical ways for us to be able to recognize? And again, we talked about the parent and the child here. If say mom, you know, is upset or dad's upset, or getting to that point where they realize they're about to lose it, what are some of the telltale signs? Are there any warning signals that they need to be aware of to realize, okay, I'm about to get there. Let me pause, right? Let me push that pause button, because there is a tendency for me to lose it. And I don't want to say anything, whether it be, you know, on married couples, because we say things when we're upset, right? Are there any practical ways, based on your experience, that we need to be able to guard against some of these things to make sure we don't get there and cause all that harm?
The main one is, if I say this, what's that going to create? It's just stop yourself.
Yeah.
Like, just really stop. And a lot of the times I also, are you willing to give up the fight? The fight to be right, the fight to not be wrong, like that. Just the fight to just, are you willing just to be, and to be with whatever it is, and just roll with it?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And what if we make the mistake and we say those cutting words? How do we then undo that damage? Sometimes it takes years, because it becomes an emotional scar that keeps playing right in the minds of whether it's a child or whoever. Because I've heard things like, I can forgive you, but I can never forget what you said to me. I can never forget what you did to me. Is there a way to, perhaps as someone listening to this podcast who may have found themselves in that situation, they may have said some things, to others that may hurt them or maybe ruined relationships, how do they manage that? Is there a way to undo that damage, or is it done for good?
No, it's never done for good. You have to recognize what you did and what you said, and then clean it up.
Yeah.
I'm really sorry I said that. That's actually a lie. It's not true.
Yeah.
And then not make them bad or wrong or whatever. I remember when I think it was my stepdad's 80th birthday, and the whole family was there, both families. And my parents lived in a relatively big house, but having 25, maybe 30 people in the house was a lot. And there were lots of dishes, and there were never paper plates. It was always china and all that. And I was in the kitchen, and the silver, and one of the silver spoons slipped into the garbage disposal, and I didn't realize it. And there was a ton of food that was coming off the plates. And so I turned the disposal on, and I heard it instantly, and I turned it off and pulled it out. And my mom came flying into the kitchen and said, "God damn it, you never helped me. I can't believe you just, blah, blah, blah." And I was stunned. I had done nothing but help, wait on people, pass things around, buy food, do all that kind of stuff. And my mom and I were very close. She was just strung out. And I went outside and walked across the yard. It was dark at that point, and just sat in the shade. And one of my brothers came over and put his arms around me and said, "I'm really sorry." And I went back in the house, and my mom was looking for me, and she said, "I was way out of line, and I am really sorry. Thank you for everything that you're doing." And I was willing to receive her apology. I think that when people, the whole thing about forgiveness is, if you're unwilling to forgive either yourself or somebody else, it means that you're hung up on needing to be righter than anybody else is.
Yes.
And that need to be right is what will kill you.
Yes.
Like, literally, it'll kill relationships. It'll kill, and over time, it'll kill you.
So spot on, Anne. So spot on. And even with that parent-child relationship, I'm not sure how many parents out there would want to apologize. I'm sure I've done it, but it takes a level of maturity, right, to be able to go apologize to your 12-year-old or 8-year-old, right, for going off, right?
What are you teaching them if you're not willing to apologize? They'll just grow up, function the same way, It's like, yeah, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off.
No. I was just petty because I've seen that, and I've heard parents say that, I'm the parent. You do what I tell you. But the opposite is actually true. And you talk about, what do we teach them? It starts right there, right? The ability for them to realize, oh gosh, mom, dad apologizing. What does that even do to the child, right? The relationship even gets better.
My question to people who function like that is, would you rather be right, or would you rather be free? A lot of people would rather be right. And that's fine. It's just good to know that.
Yeah.
Like, it's like, okay.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Going back to the book that you wrote with your friends, would you teach a fish to climb a tree? Can you tell us a little bit about that book and what lessons there are? I haven't read it. It sounds like a book I'd like to read for sure.
It's an awesome book. I have it right here. Can I show it?
Yes, please go ahead.
It's this.
Yeah.
Yeah. And it's backwards. This is so weird. Is it backward for you?
No, it's not. It's showing correctly.
It's showing. There's something weird with my Zoom thing. So it's a little, okay. So by way of description, it's a little outside the box. And the three of us are pretty far outside a lot of boxes. And what we talk about in there is our experiences and the tools that are used and that we talk about actually do work with these kids, with the kids with ADD, ADHD, OCD, and autism. And so I used to apologize, oh my God, and I don't anymore. My therapy practice is nowhere near like what it used to be. I've sort of like backed off a little bit with the travel and the classes and like that kind of stuff, and it's starting to pick up again. But one of there was a pediatrician who used to send me all of her kids for whom there was really extreme physical stuff going on, but no medical basis for it, like no scientific evidence of whatever it was that was causing it that she could then heal or cure, and so she would do symptom stuff, but that was it. And then she would send the families to me and the family, I'd meet with the parents first typically, and I'd do the intake, what's up, what's going on, and they'd tell me. And then when in a therapy session, when they're comfortable, when they click, when you're going to be able to work together, both, because anyway, that's another story. And then they would say to me when they started feeling comfortable, do you want to know what she says about you? I'd say, sure, because it was always the same thing. And they would say, she says, you're really far outside the box, and she has no idea what it is that you do, but whatever it is really works. So like for me, like the willingness to be that different. And so that's a lot of what this book is.
Yeah. Yeah. And
what are a little far out there, and they actually really work.
I'm going to pick that one up because I'd like to read it. But then where do people go for help? I think a lot of times it's that I don't even know where to start, right? I'm having this challenge, with my kids or with myself. Where do we even start out? So unfortunately, most people who are troubled by a depressed emotional state ask their physicians rather than a psychotherapist or a professional what to do. So the man with a hammer, as the saying goes, the world's a nail. Doctors give pills, right? So where do people go for help? Maybe there's someone, listening to this podcast or maybe experiencing some challenges, whether it be parenting with the kids. Where do they go? What resources are out there for them to go for help?
You just have to ask. Yeah. I mean, I've got a website, I've got a practice. There are other people out there that you have to ask. I'm a big believer in, ask and you shall receive.
Yep.
But you ask for help from the universe or from God or whatever it is that you call it.
Yep.
And then just pay attention to who comes into your world. Like you want to ask for or pray for somebody like that doctor or like me. And they're out there. We're not the only two on the planet, and just ask. And I'm not everybody's cup of tea. I get that, and I'm good with that. There are a lot of people that are much more comfortable with the traditional behavioral models and like that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
And I don't throw everything out. My practice is pretty eclectic, and it happens to be a sort of a compilation of the tools and the points of view and the things that I found that actually work for my clients and work for me. So, yeah. But you just ask. Yeah. There's no right answer. I think the first thing is to get off the idea that if you can just figure it out and come up with a right decision, then everything's going to be all right. Life's not like that. There's no rightness in life. It's like you get hung up on needing to be right.
Yeah.
you're gonna end up living a pretty small life.
And as we wrap up here, any words of encouragement to someone who, may be on the verge of giving up, whether in themselves and their kids, or these kids will never amount to anything. I'm done. Just at the point of giving up. I mean, you've worked with diverse kids all over these years, right? I'm sure you've seen them all. But what words of hope or encouragement would you give someone, maybe a parent who just can't see anything past all the challenges right now? Anything you want to say to someone listening tonight?
Yeah, don't give up and ask a question. Like, who can I find that can help me? Where can I go? What can I say? What can I do? What can I read? What resources are out there for me? And really ask for it. Ask and you shall receive is one of the best parts of the Bible ever.
Yeah, Matthew 7:7, right?
Ask, right? Ask. And then know that oftentimes it never shows up the way you think it's going to. Like, if you ask with a particular result in mind, you're just going to create more ways to try to make yourself right and not wrong. But if you ask, you'd be amazed at what the universe or God can come up for you. It's almost like your job is to ask and then get out of your own way.
Yeah. And then just wait patiently.
It's up to the universe and to God to figure out how to get it to you. And it may take a while, but it'll work.
And in this society, we want it what we want it now, everything on our terms, right? It takes some level of maturity, I guess, to be able to your point, get out of the way, right? And let God.
Absolutely.
Right.
Well, and pay attention, like be aware, right? Yeah. Cool. Thank you so much.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for coming on the Time with Fred podcast. I want to thank you for your time, and we'll get through this. I'm glad to hear your business is picking up, and hopefully we get to have you again some other time to share some insights based on what's happening around. So thank you so much, and to our audience who joined us this evening, thank you as well for your time.